Alright, what's up everyone? It's Tyvokka. I just wanted to kind of come here and maybe try a new format of updating the tier list that I put out on my spreadsheet. So this is just going to be a video companion to the updates that I'm making to the tier list in my spreadsheet, which you can find whenever. The tier list will be linked in the comments and probably in the description too. Alright. So yeah, we had a pretty big patch recently. Almost every Batfam character except for Red Hood got touched, and I believe every Titan got touched except for Adam. So I just wanted to kind of, analyze where we are and if anything is really going to change. So if you look at the tier list right now, this is what it was before any adjustments. I haven't made any adjustments before the video started. I wanted to kind of do them in live time just to kind of explain myself as I make moves. And then on the right here, we have all the characters I'll be updating and including Wally, who I'll be adding to the tier list. He's been out for about a week in soft launch. So, I've seen some testing from Arcalog. I've done some testing myself across I've league mates who sent screenshots with over a plethora of star levels. So I think I have a solid grasp on this character, but I've been wrong, and I can be wrong, and I have been wrong in the past. So of course, take this placement with a grain of salt. We should know in about I think a little over a week. No, sorry, Artemis comes first. So we've got a little over a month before he hits global servers, the 206 and later. So, very early testing placement here, subject to change, obviously. And I'll probably update it, before I make a video, maybe put an announcement or something. Anyways, okay, long ramble out of the way, let's get started on the video. Okay, so before we get into any actual movement, I want to quickly go over my breaking down of my tiers because, I mean, you can see it in the spreadsheet if you go into it yourself, but I think it makes sense to explain it in the video since I haven't done a video on this tier list before. So basically, S plus tier, we have the top tier. This is like, these champions are hard meta. You will see them in basically, if not every version of a meta team comp in predominantly PvP. I think the game mode that affects this tier the least is combat cycle because characters like Hippolyta and like Swamp, they're just like, you're not going to need them in combat cycle anyways because, Krakens can just get away with like a stupid high level Starbolt or, just no healer at all. So for the most part, since the game is predominantly a PvP game, PvP probably has from what I do, PvP has the biggest effect on rankings. PvE is taken into account, like ACN, combat cycle, training sim, all of that, but like training sim is kind of just not too dissimilar from PvP, other than the fact that you can have multiple of the same characters on the enemy team. So it's not crazy. There's not a crazy margin between PvP and and TSim. So that's S plus tier. It's like pinnacle, top, hard meta, best characters in the game. S tier, pretty simple. Tier below that, very strong, but held back for one or more reasons from the top tier. Just briefly, Swamp Thing, I think he kind of stops doing stuff after the first like 10 seconds of the battle. He just sits there and takes damage, which isn't bad. That's why he's no lower, but he doesn't have enough consistent presence over the duration of a battle for me to put him higher. But I think some people might disagree with that. That's totally fine. DPS are the hardest, I think, to get a clear-cut S plus tier outside of Sinestro because I honestly, Khan and Nightwing are both just like barely clinging on to S tier at this point. Khan got booted pretty quickly once Swamp Thing came back in the meta and people were running the Khan, Swamp, Zatanna core, and then usually just running like Hippo Sin or Death Metal Wonder Woman, like just some combinations of that. Khan was getting benched really quickly from Wales, from what I saw. He was always the secondary DPS. He was kind of just there because you wanted a third JLD to trigger Swamp Thing's passive and give the extra damage reduction. He's not great. He's kind of he's still great. He's still good. He's still a good character, but And Nightwing too. I think he's just shy of he's Nightwing is always I think Nightwing and Khan are pushed so hard, and part of why I push them so hard when I talk to free to players and I talk to new players is they're probably the most consistent in that they're just below top tier across the board. You know, like they're very strong in combat cycle, they're very strong in meta brawl, they're very strong in ship game modes, but they're not like a definitive top tier. So that's how I view these characters at least. You know, and then I mean a lot of these I'll talk about. I think some of these might move later down in the video, but we'll see. You know, it's just these characters that are still very good, but they have maybe one or two reasons that holds them back from just being a must run. A plus tier below that. Usually it's because there's a considerable gap in their PvP and PvE performance, which I think the two there's three characters I think that stick out. Them or four characters actually that define that the best. Crypto, Lobo, Nurse Harley, and Supergirl are all very strong in combat cycle and PvE, not so great in PvP at the moment. And I would say the flip side with Lex and Artemis were both very strong in PvP. Artemis does really good damage against single target combat cycle bosses, so she's more of Green Arrow, where it's like they're good, but they're not good enough that I can't put Artemis on the same level as Swamp Thing. I can't put Green Lantern on the same tier as like Riddler, or even Starfire if Starfire was an S tier. So that's A plus tier, very good, just below top tier. A tier, solid champions, slightly above average. Like you know, you'll see the top end of the regular mythics in here. They're good. They're definitely good, but they have multiple scenarios where they're not good, or you know they started higher and they've fallen down from power creep. But you know, like their presence in certain things is like they're still used enough that it's like can't bump them any lower, but they're still solid. B tier, middle of the road champions. Usually, if you see a bleed here, just means they're a skip. Honestly, most A tier and lower bleeds are just skips in my opinion. There's some higher ones. I'll make another video on a graphic I just put out about skippable bleed units, but yeah, B tier is just middle of the road. These champions are pretty average, not a bad invest, but I wouldn't, you know, if you're a free to play player, I would not invest in these units crazy heavy. C tier, I've designated that as kind of like the early game tier, because I like that in the sense that I think some of these legendary characters would just be hard F tier, and like, you know, like Batman and Harley are both pretty strong in the early game, and then they just completely fall off. But like, D tier is my niche tier. These are characters that are like, there's a few exceptions, but overall, I don't recommend building these characters until you have a developed roster. You know, with the exception of build Two-Face if you run Joker for combat cycle early on, but then even then Two-Face kind of gets replaced. He's started to basically completely get replaced from combat cycle, except for one boss where he's boosted. And same with Stargirl, where I think these two are the ones where it's ironically you invest in them early on and then stop investing in them later on because their niche is more of early game niche. So maybe they should be on C tier, but you know, whatever. They have well defined niches. Two-Face is buffing damage over time. Stargirl is the only cleanser in the game, so she works great with the Drowned. And then F tier, pretty self-explanatory. I think most of you guys will be able to determine it just from who's in it. These are the characters. There's just no feasible reason to invest in them in the current metagame. You're just not going to get new value out of these characters. Okay. So to the right here, I have the characters just listed in alphabetical order to go. We're going to do Wally last, because I don't, you know, just, he's fully new. I think he needs his own little segment. So right out of the gate, Arsenal got a very minor buff, but it's a buff I actually don't hate. You'll kind of notice the three outsiders are all here: Arsenal, Martian Manhunter, and Starfire. They both are, all three of them. The main goal with their reworks or buffs, we'll get to that later, is they seem to be trying to remove the dependency on outsiders as a tag synergy, because they gave those characters additional synergy for their other respective team. So in Arsenal's case, he got a very minor buff, where he now gives Teen Titan allies crit damage whenever he ults. So it works really well with Nightwing, works pretty good with Wally. Robin will benefit from that too in a Teen Titans lineup. So I still think Arsenal as a character is just not great, because he is a subpar damage dealer and he's a subpar supporting unit, but I don't think he's F tier anymore. I think this has been a little outdated for a little bit. Honestly, even post his initial rework, I think what he should be doing is he should be moving up to C tier. I think he's He's just slightly better than Green Arrow at max from the testing I've seen. So the second Green Arrow gets an awakening, Arsenal's probably going to drop down to niche tier or maybe even back to F tier. But for now, I think there's enough diversity that I think he will do. I think he makes sense in C tier. Okay, now that Arsenal is done, we're going to move on to Batgirl. Batgirl was an interesting rework. So she used to give a little bit of energy and the whole team crit rate. They kind of scaled back on her ability to give crit rate and let her heal. Um, I don't like that. It didn't sound horrible at first, but I've always also been under the impression that Batfam doesn't need a healer. I think Batfam is under the same boat as Laud, where it's like you just kill as quick as possible. The issue was they literally only had Nightwing to kill. They needed more DPS. They needed better DPS than Robin and Red Hood, who were just Robin, Red Hood, and Batman, or were all garbage. When Batfam was starting out, Red Hood got an ascension, went from garbage to like okay. Robin, I think, is still probably, other than Deadshot, the worst DPS in the game. I would unironically put Arsenal higher than them, higher than Robin in terms of value. So we'll see if Robin gets adjusted, but I just don't like Robin. He's really squishy. Batman, obviously, just not great before his rework. And I think Batgirl was the only thing keeping that team together, and I think this rework kind of hurt that a lot. She can't instant ult anymore. She used to like instantly ult, give her the whole team crit rate, and Nightwing could ult right after, nuke people. Just not a thing anymore. Her healing is like not good either. She heals every time she crits, which like is interesting. I've never seen a game try and do that, but I don't think it works at all. I don't think her healing is very good. I think it's just I think it's just not a good rework. I think I think unfortunately I'm going to have to move her down to B tier. I loved that she was as good as she was for a while, because she was also, a pretty good universal buffer, because she could just give anyone crit. Like, I remember super early game, people were giving Superman crit because he doesn't have crit in his just base stats. There's some fun stuff you could do with her, but you can't do it anymore. I think, unfortunately, she's going to have to move down a tier for me. Okay, moving on to Batman. He's in an interesting spot. I think the rework objectively did just make him better, but I still don't think it's enough to move him out of where he is right now. I think he's still just early game good, and then he has some, the stun is nice, he has some usage in Fog, in the Batfam Realm of Fate. But yeah, I still don't think he's crazy. I don't think he's on par with the other two B tier tanks. I just don't think he's providing as much, so I'm gonna have to just unfortunately leave him in C tier for now. I think Batman's a character they know he's kind of mid, and they don't plan on changing that, because they're just gonna release Death Metal Batman and make him like S++ tier, and that's probably almost definitely their plan. But unfortunately for now, I think Batman will just always be stuck in that, like, he's kind of early game. He's also weird because he's behind like a soft paywall. Just weird decisions with Batman, but unfortunately he is just not good, and I don't think this buff, while it did buff him to make him better, I don't think it was enough to make him worth moving up. Alright, moving on to Cyborg. Cyborg was interesting because pretty much since the game came out, he's been hard bugged, where he was also just buffing Joker's damage. He buffed spiritual damage, not just Joker, but Joker was the big notice, because you could just throw the two of them in combat cycle together, even though Cyborg was supposed to only debuff enemies' physical damage taken. He was also buffing spiritual damage taken. So he did lose that with the most recent buff, or the most recent rework, and that's my little tinfoil hat theory, is they did that because they just couldn't figure out how to fix the bug that's been in the game since the game out. So now Cyborg is directly impacting physical damage. He got slightly better. I don't think he's always been good, honestly. Like, he's always been good. I think the free-to-play light spender Titans meta, which I think is, one of, if not the best team for free-to-plays and light spenders to go to, because you only really have to go for Nightwing, bleed-wise. He's been a surprisingly good off-tank, and I think, we'll get to later, with the most recent Red Robin changes, I think he might be the best secondary frontliner now. So I'm gonna go ahead and move him up to A tier from B tier. I'll keep an eye on that. I don't like. I've always kind of wanted him to be an A tier, And even though he did lose the ability to buff spiritual damage, however unintentional that was, I still think it was like a decent bump to just his usability. And now that he's like consistently, he's having some issues with ranges I've seen, but I'm also just like overall, I think people are noticing him helping characters deal more damage, but he might move back down kind of as things progress. We'll see. It's all right. So we're gonna look at Wonder Girl, Donna Troy next. Donna Troy was in a weird spot because uh, running her on Teen Titans was always kind of just like a pipe dream. She had the option to synergize to allow for a hybrid comp between Titans and Amazons, but Beta was the only one who really got to see that outside of Death Metal Wonder Woman people, obviously. Because I think the core of Artemis, Hippo, and Donna plus two Titans was actually pretty solid. Her entire purpose was the third skill, which is the one they gave a little buff to, where she just gives physical defense to Amazon allies for just existing on the team. Now, in addition to giving physical defense to Amazon allies, she gives spiritual defense to Titans. So kind of the same thing where her main purpose is to exist, give all of her team the spiritual defense buff, and then maybe live long enough to get her ult off, and then her ult her ult makes enemies take more damage from physical damage. So works well with Nightwing, works great with Amazons because Amazons is all physical dealers. But I don't know if I want to move her out of D tier just yet because I still think she's kind of niche. Like, I think you can use her if you have nothing else, but Titans is just really, really badly in need of a solid frontliner now, especially after the Starfire change, as we'll get to in a bit. But yeah, she's better. I don't think she leaves niche tier yet because I think her niche is pretty much just making Titans and Amazons be able to hybrid. Like, even in a full Amazons team, I think she's going to be the first to get replaced easily when the next Amazon comes out, however long that takes. But yeah, so I'm gonna just leave her in D tier. Definitely a good buff. Definitely a solid, very solid little buff to her that I think she will benefit from. All right, and then I also wanted to talk about Lobo now that I've had a little more time to experiment with him. I hesitantly threw him in A+ at the start because he was doing good. He definitely had damage output, but I think after further testing, I almost don't even want to put him in A tier. I'm tempted to drop him all the way down to B tier. I'm gonna hesitantly leave him in. I'm just gonna leave him up here for now, but I think it's worth noting it's very likely that he drops even further down to B tier. I think Lobo is a character who is a high investment character. He's kind of a combat cycle one-trick pony because he does insane single target physical damage with investment, but the problem is if you can't level up his revive skill, he revives with like a literal a singular tick of HP. So any kind of additional damage will just instantly kill him again. I've had Constantine get his second fire ring off. He instantly dies the second he gets revived. I've had Nightwings literally Lobo will revive. Lobo will die to Nightwing ult, revive, and then the revive is instantaneously and leaves him with like 1 HP. So Nightwing will just chain to him again, instantly kill him. Deathstroke will, do his first skill where he swings in a circle. Lobo will revive and then die to the second hit of the swing. So yeah, his revive is just not good. His legacy piece is kind of mid, and you're investing a lot into a character that is really only gonna net you like moderate value in combat cycle from what I've seen. So I can't really warrant placing him higher than that. So he's just gonna stay in A for now. All right, Martian Manhunter got a very minor buff. Sorry to spoil, but it's not gonna affect his ranking. I don't think he's suddenly we've had talks. I've had talks with people in the community about him before. He's not bad. Definitely not bad. I think he's still he's pretty good at just surviving. But I think you need to invest in him heavy. You need to invest in both him and his legacy piece really hard to get value out of him. And the value he gets is like decent plug and play off tank, decent Constantine counter, decent Supergirl counter, and he doesn't really excel anywhere. And he's just such a high investment. I can't warrant putting him any higher. But what they did is they gave his third skill. He gets a duration increase on Mind Ward, which is his counterattack ability. It used to be you had to have 3 outsiders, which means you were forced to use Arsenal in a team with him to get the max value. Now it's 3 outsiders, 3 Justice League. So he got moved from bad team 1 to bad team 2. Um, Justice League is not in a good spot right now. Just a hodgepodge of okay characters. So it was not enough. Okay, on to Raven here. Raven actually, I think, got a pretty nice buff. Um, they gave her spiritual defense on alt, so she gives all allies spiritual defense, and they undid a rework they did on her a couple months back where she originally used to get more healing up per Justice League Dark ally. They took it off, just gave her straight attack. Now they took the straight attack, put her back to getting boosted for JLD allies. So she's going to heal less on full Titans teams, and I think it's because they want to push Starfire as the Titans healer, and, you know, that A, gets Starfire off of Outsiders, which they seem to have given up on. You know, it pushes the Nightwing people to summon for Starfire because Starfire is the best healer for Titans, and it pushes Raven back to JLD, where she'll inevitably get benched for Swamp Thing, Zatanna, and, you know, when Swamp Thing comes out for your server. But Raven, I think, is still pretty solid. I think she's a great character for ship game modes. I think, you know, she's okay. She was the worst healer in my opinion for a while. I think that's definitely changed. I think the recent Ivy rework made her much worse. Batgirl, now being a healer, is interesting because she's also just a worse healer. And Mara is just kind of early game healer who then just completely falls off a cliff. So I'm going to keep her in A tier for now. I think she definitely got a pretty solid buff. I don't think it's enough for her to, like, you know, she's not going to suddenly shoot up in usability, but she's definitely now a more consistent character and a very solid character. All right, and now for my boy Red Robin. Unfortunately, they have killed this character. Really sad. He used to just get like 50 to 60% damage reduction for just existing. They switched it out and made it like a gimmick dodge, heal every time you dodge. Sounds good on paper, but physical damage is in just such a bad spot right now because Sinestro and JLD are just dominant. It just sucks. He was a very good. I think he probably had the best individual tanking out of all the standard mythic tanks, and now he's just one of the worst. He's so squishy. If you're not consistently dodging, you're not consistently healing. You know, we just talked about how Batgirl's healing is not saving anyone. So yeah, I think unfortunately, as much as it pains me, I am gonna have to move him all the way down from D tier to niche tier because I just like I don't know why they do. I don't know why they did my boy like that. You can use him in Realm of Fate. You can use him against physical comps, I guess. I mean, he's still not horrible in the Titans team, but like, man, he's just so much worse. Like he was such a good tank, and they kind of just gutted him for no reason to make Batfam a gimmick dodge team. All right, then we have Robin. They did stuff to him. I don't know. He went from being bad to still being bad. So like, I don't feel the need to talk about him too much. He was never great. He was always just like super budget Nightwing, and now I think he's still super budget Nightwing, but he does maybe 2% more damage. That was a random number. I don't know. They gave him some more attack. They moved some numbers around. He still just feels terrible. He's so squishy at low stars. By the time you get him to high stars, if you have him at like red stars, you're facing people who are just obliterating him in one hit with like anything. He got a bunch of dodge, but like we said earlier, dodge just doesn't matter right now. Dodge is not a good stat. They're like trying to force feed dodge as a good stat, but it doesn't matter because the top of the meta is spiritual damage, and there's 2 spiritual damage DPS somehow. I don't know. Meta's in a wonky spot, but yeah, Robin went from bad to still bad, so I'm not gonna move him. All right, and next we have Starfire. Starfire got a pretty interesting rework. It sounded pretty good on paper, and I think it actually turned out a little worse than we were expecting, or at least some of, myself and some others were expecting. She has definitely lost the ability to consistently tank in the front line, largely due to now the damage reduction is applied later, and her ult takes longer to go off. It takes her longer to get enough energy to ult. So she has definitely lost a bit of the tankiness, and I think that kind of makes sense in terms of what the alleged vision of the devs is that, I guess similar to what they did to Scarecrow, which Scarecrow's all, they gutted Scarecrow because he had one specific niche that made the game unplayable. But the reasoning behind the Scarecrow changes was that they don't want one character to be able to do everything, and I think that was also the reason behind these Starfire changes, because she was definitely able to do basically everything. She had okay damage for a healer. She was healing. She was damage reduction. She was reducing damage and reducing enemy attack on the first skill. So she was very, very much able to just sit in the front line and just exist, even at even at purple 1 to purple 3. So I think the devs really didn't like that she could do that. So I think, unfortunately, losing the ability to do that is gonna have to bump her down a tier. I think she is still easily the best healer in the game, like the best character that is meant to be a healer. But I don't think she's worthy of an S plus tier anymore. I think she's definitely still very good. She's definitely still on the stall comps that high level spenders are running. But I think she has just lost that universal, must run top tier meta viability. And then on the flip side of that, I think I am gonna have to move Riddler up to S plus tier. This character is disgusting. He's everywhere. The combination of him and Swamp Thing is just unfair. Because as soon as Swamp Thing's DR goes down, Riddler's there with a 1,000,000 shield. Riddler is just stupid. Riddler is just Dr. Fate, but what if we made him good? Yeah, I think he and then just for the cherry on top, he heals now. When his shield, or he heals when his shield drop when you have his legacy piece. So I think Riddler is just a very good champion. I think Riddler is 100% worthy of being moved up to S tier, S plus tier, now that Starfire has kind of dropped. All right, and the last rework we're going to talk about is Superboy. He got a very seemingly minor buff, but I think it's actually a very good buff, in that now he is on the Titans tag. Very good change for him. Just don't think it's enough to squeak him up to S plus, because I think Zatanna is just consistently better in more scenarios. But Superboy is definitely very solid now because he got moved. Superfam's just in a horrible spot. Supergirl is not doing enough. She can't do enough fast enough in PvP to matter. Crypto has stupid alt delay for 9,000 years in PvP, and Superman has just been Omega power crept. So Superfam, terrible spot. Superboy got moved off of that to the team they're definitely trying to push as the meta counter, even though I don't think they succeeded in doing that. But yeah, I think Superboy got a very, very good buff. I'm going to keep an eye on potentially moving him up. Not yet. I haven't seen enough of him with Titans. Maybe if a few Krakens are able to start, breaking into the shield comps or the JLD stall comps with Titans, which I don't expect that. I fully don't expect that to happen, but it could happen. Then I'll look at moving him up. But I think for now he's staying S tier, but he's now a comfortable S tier. I almost moved him down before Titans. I almost moved him down to A plus before the Titan synergy came around. But I think now that he has that Titan synergy, I think he's 100% an S tier character. Very solid character. Now a character that if you're building Nightwing, you can think of picking him up. When I think before it was just kind of Zatanna is just better. I think there's now more scenarios where it's valuable for a free-to-play or a light spender to pick up Superboy instead of maybe Zatanna. Now that we have all the main things I wanted to cover with the new changes, I want to look at Wally West, the newest character. Bad news, I think he's really mid. I think he fails for a few reasons. I think the devs are struggling to make firepower units because you have characters like Lex, Arsenal, Two-Face, Aquaman, who act more as supporters or debuffers than they do DPS, and then so you're kind of split down the middle. You have half the firepower classes trying to be pseudo supports that buff the teams that they're on. The other half are trying to be genuine DPS, and they don't have the stats to do that. So yeah, I don't know. I think Wally is hurt by being a firepower. I think his legacy piece is really subpar. I don't think it actually really helps him that much. And I think the other issue too is a lot of people throw around the word shield meta, which we are in to an extent, but we're not only in a shield meta. We're in just as much of a damage reduction meta as we are in a shield meta, because you have the top shielder is obviously Riddler. He has disgusting shields. But you have Swamp Thing, who's giving damage reduction and attack down for the first 10 seconds. And then Hippo is a combination of both shielding and damage reduction. So the three best characters at keeping your team alive, he's countering Riddler on ult, and he's countering Hippo's first ability, which gives a shield. He's doing nothing about damage reduction, so he's just getting walled by these characters still, and Starfire. He's getting walled by the 3 damage reduction units. He's not doing enough to break through a Riddler. He can't break through the Riddler swamp comps. He's not getting enough energy. He's not doing enough damage. The only thing I've ever seen him break consistently, and this is with fully maxed Max Stars 5 blue legacy piece Wally, was a Riddler Fate JLD comp, which is not a very common comp. Unless there are like a ton of shielders on the enemy team, he's not breaking the shields, and he's not doing enough to be valuable. And I think he's just objectively worse than Lobo at combat cycle. At least Lobo is doing insane single target damage in combat cycle. I've seen Arca did send a screenshot last night in our league chat of Wally doing 100 million in combat cycle, but that was with a full purple legacy piece, and I think he's already investing in transmutes on the character. So yeah, I think honestly going forward, now that we've had 2 firepower bleeds back to back, I think I'm comfortable in saying that they are whale food just by default. I think this class is just in a bad spot right now. I think they kind of need to readjust how they, make firepower characters. I think they need to either commit to making them genuine DPS or, supporters. Like maybe Wally is more of like he removes shields with hits instead of doing more damage through shields. I think maybe something like that would make him better, and he's just needs a flat defensive boost. Titans needs a better front line. Flash Fam isn't a team yet. I don't think he's great, and I don't think he's really worth summoning on for a lot of new players. So I'm gonna, early on, subject to change, I'm gonna start off by just slotting him into B tier. Unfortunately, I know a lot of people were very excited for Wally. A lot of people I know were very hyped about him being added. I just don't think he's very good. Yeah, all right. I think that is going to do it. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this type of video. I'm trying something new because I think a lot of the times I just make these changes off camera, and it's a little easier than individually typing notes for every single character and noting everything. But I think I enjoy this style of content where I'm kind of just rambling about my opinions on characters, and I will hopefully make more content like this, maybe going over some of the infographics I make. And yeah, just let me know if you guys enjoyed this, if you guys have any tips, because I am, very new to doing this. But yeah, all right, I'll talk to you guys later.